Hello, everybody. Happy Friday morning. Hope yours is going well. We've got another Seahawks video to get to today, but first we just hit 4,180 subscribers. Yes, it's 80. Trust me, I checked. Shout out to all the subscribers, and a special tip of the cap goes to the channel members, especially elite channel members Brendon, Mikel, Hasher, Salacious, Crumb, Ryguy, Brendan Nelson's Haircut, VGK Tigers, ItsHoof, The Reno, TlVlO, Austin Roberts, Scott Todd, PH Glass, Aaron Garrett, Eiferman, 12th Man, Eli Bennett, Cassio Feria, Samoan, JoJo, and Rep the 206. All right, so we move on to part 5 of our 7-part series, taking a look at the most pivotal players for the 2021 Seattle Seahawks. Which players have a lot to prove, and which players have a lot to prove on behalf of the organization, especially. Which players are most pivotal to this front office proving that they are on the ball, that they're making the right decisions. So now we're getting into the heavy hitters. These are the guys who have a huge say in whether or not the 2021 Seahawks are successful. These guys will make or break the season in big, obvious, and clear ways. The previous 4 guys, they all have their part to play, but now we're starting to get into the guys who really have a lot to prove. Well, in a manner of speaking, this player that we're going to talk about today, has already earned his stripes in Seattle. This player, if he retired tomorrow, would be a Ring of Honor member, future Hall of Famer, and one of the best players in franchise history. He's already earned his credit. He is already a beloved member of this franchise no matter what happens. So it's not so much that Bobby Wagner, who we're going to talk about today, has a ton to prove. It's the organization that wants to prove that the bet that they made on him ended up paying out. And a big chunk of whether or not that bet pays out will be determined on the field in 2021. All right, let's talk about exactly what I mean by that. What bet did the Seahawks make on Bobby Wagner? What am I talking about? The 3rd contract. Not a lot of NFL players get the 3rd contract unless they play quarterback or kicker or sometimes wide receiver, I guess. You don't see it that often. Usually, an NFL player, they get their rookie contract, they get the 2nd contract, and then they're at that point probably going to move on somewhere else. We've given out a lot of 3rd contracts in the last 5-6 years, and we've usually really regretted it. Michael Bennett, Cam Chancellor, Marshawn Lynch, one reason or another, it kept going bad. We decided not to give the 3rd contract to Earl Thomas, and that seems to have worked out pretty well for us. So here's one 3rd contract we gave out that so far has been okay. I don't know. It depends on who you ask, but Bobby Wagner, we gave him a 3rd contract after 2018. 2018, he had a career year, by the way. Really good stuff from him that year. We extended his contract by 3 seasons, $54 million. His average annual value of his contract is still the highest of any interior linebacker in the league. So we had the opportunity, and who knows if he would have allowed this to happen. We could have let him walk after 2019, but we decided to extend him before that season and go forward from there. And how has that worked out for us? Because in 2019, I've gone on record saying I don't really think he played that well. I didn't see a whole lot going on there other than pile jumping. And in 2020, well, there was some stuff to like. I do think it would be fair to say he bounced back. He was more active in terms of getting after the quarterback, in terms of his QB pressures. He had 11 quarterback hits. His tackles were down mostly because of the fact that teams were not running the ball on us, but his efficiency and effectiveness in stopping the run was way better than it had been in previous years. He was much better in coverage, which is reflected in these advanced metrics. His yards allowed in coverage went down by about 170 yards. Completion percentage went down by 16%. He gave up 6 fewer completions on 9 more targets, which is actually quite impressive for a middle linebacker. He Did miss a few too many tackles. He missed like 10 or 11. I can't remember which one it was. According to PFR, it's 10, but I think it might have been 11. And he didn't force turnovers, but he was a good player in 2020, I think. I think it's fair to say he brought enough to the table in 2020. PFF agrees. They gave him a PFF grade of 83.2. I don't know if I agree with that, but I do believe that Wagner had a good year in 2020. And you guys might remember I kept track of a lot of this stuff in Wagner Watch, and I came out of 2020 not really sure how to feel, but I did get the sense that Wagner was a significantly better player in 2020 than he was in 2019. Now, 2021 is going to be the last year of Bobby Wagner's Seattle career, almost certainly. In 2022, he'll be due over $20 million and due less than $4 million if cut. So that is a savings of nearly $17 million. Please tell me this team is smart enough to realize you need to save $17 million when you have an opportunity like that. So I don't expect Bobby Wagner to be here in 2022. If he is, it'll probably be on a completely redone contract. It'll probably be a much smaller deal, more commiserate with his level of play at that point in time. So this is probably the end of that 3 year extension. And if he can have a good season in 2021, then we will have gotten out of that third contract looking pretty good. Not great, because Bobby Wagner is getting the most money of any middle linebacker in the league, and I don't feel like he's been the best middle linebacker, but at least he's produced. He's getting big tackle numbers, and I think tackles are a little overrated, but he's productive against the run. Last year, on running plays that ended in a Bobby Wagner tackle, he was only giving up 3.4 yards per. He was active deflecting passes. He was solid against the pass for the most part. In most of these areas, you would say he was doing pretty well. And I do want him to be a little better in 2021 somehow. Find a way to be a bigger playmaker. Force a couple turnovers. Last year, he did not have a single interception. He did not force a single fumble. If you take a look at the other high usage middle linebackers in the NFL, one way or the other, they're forcing a couple turnovers over the course of a season. And I know it's just a couple, but I think we all understand that a turnover can be worth more than 30 tackles over the course of a game. What if Bobby Wagner forced a fumble against the Giants? Maybe we BS a win in that game. We get the 1 seed, and we might be talking about a season where we at least made the NFC title game. Who knows? But if he can keep the good stuff from 2020 in 2021 and maybe add a little bit something else, maybe add a couple of plays in coverage to get an interception or two, then I feel like we're headed in the right direction. And I feel like Bobby will have acquitted himself pretty well of his third contract. So, what's the kind of standard we can hold Bobby Wagner to in 2021? Um, let's just start with him as an individual player, because we can compare him to the other players, his peers, kind of like what we did last year, right? And if you take a look at the high usage middle linebackers in the NFL, the guys who are among the league leaders in tackles: Zach Cunningham, Jalen Smith, Blake Martinez, Joe Schobert, Devin White, Roquan Smith, Fred Warner. These are the guys who are considered to be the most prolific run stopping middle linebackers in the league, along with Wagner. You can compare Wagner's numbers to them, and you're going to see Wagner is better than them in some areas, not as good as them in some areas, and approximately equivalent in some others. His 3 sacks are better than Jalen Smith or Joe Schobert or Fred Warner, but they're clearly less than a guy like Devin White. I mean, wow, or Roquan Smith. You can see that his 8 tackles for loss are actually pretty substandard. Only Fred Warner and Jalen Smith had fewer in this group. His 8 pass deflections were actually among the league leaders for middle linebackers. But you can also see his inability to force a single turnover puts him in an unfortunate grouping with the rest of these players. All of them either had at least one interception or forced one fumble. So we can also look at coverage numbers, and we can see that what Bobby did in 2020 stacked up fairly well with other middle linebackers across the league. Zach Cunningham was pretty awful in coverage in 2020. Jalen Smith was okay. Bobby was probably better than him by a little bit. Blake Martinez was approximately equivalent. Joe Schobert in coverage, a little worse than Wagner probably. Devin White put up man numbers in coverage. Roquan Smith, he actually had a great year in coverage, only allowed 290 yards in coverage over 16 games. And Fred Warner had an awesome year in coverage too, 270 yards in 16 games. So if you take a look at individual performances of these players, you're going to see some areas where Wagner stacks up well, some where he doesn't, and some somewhere in the middle. So if he can continue to do what he did in 2020, plus adding a little something extra, I think that's pretty good for him individually. But here's the thing, when it comes to a player like a Bobby Wagner, who you are paying more money than anybody else on this team outside of Russell Wilson, it's not just about your individual performance. It's about the team, the defense, and really, the gamble that the Seahawks made on Bobby Wagner will not be reflected in terms of win or loss by his individual numbers, at least not completely. It'll be determined by how this defense performs as a whole. See, most NFL teams these days, they are building their defense around defensive linemen, mostly edge rushers. Let me zoom in a little bit here. And they are building it around cornerbacks. Those are the guys who get the big money. You're seeing edge rushers make $100 million. You're seeing cornerbacks sign monster contracts. Those are the positions that are considered high leverage right now. In the case of the Seattle Seahawks defense, we went the other way. We decided to build our defense by investing in linebacker and safety. And believe me, I will bring this back up again tomorrow when we talk about our next player. Take a wild guess on who it is. But this team decided we're going to cheap out a little bit on edge rushers. We're going to try to get a pass rush by committee. We're going to try to let Carroll work with some spare parts at corner. And we're going to make our big investments at linebacker and safety, which is not conventional. And last year, for the most part, it didn't really work. In terms of yards allowed per game, the Seahawks barely avoided the bottom 10. They were 22nd in the league. 22nd in the league in yards allowed, over 380 a game. Points, little better. If you go by points, they were 15th, just barely above average, 23.2 points a game. So, not just talking about what Bobby Wagner does in terms of his individual performance and individual stats. This is about what this team does, because ultimately, the team made the investments that they made into unconventional positions because they believed that that was the best way for them to have a good defense. They believed that by investing heavily in those positions and zigging when other teams are zagging, it could produce good results, right? I think we all understand that if a team is producing good results in that they're scoring points, not allowing points, and they're winning games, it doesn't matter how you built your team as long as that's the end result. So Wagner can have his greatest season ever in 2021. If the defense isn't good, then it can't have been right. Because what are you doing if it's not in the service of your team being effective at the end of the day? Not because everything that happens on this defense is all Wagner's responsibility, but this front office made a gamble when they gave Wagner a third contract. And the way I see it, this is the rubber match. 2021 is kind of the rubber match for this third contract. If we can have a good defense this year, if it can come out of the gate and help us win games right from week one, if it's one of the better defensive units in the league, if we're maybe top 10 in scoring defense by the end of the year, then things like the Wagner extension make sense, as long as he's playing well along that. But if Wagner's playing lights out and the defense can't stop anybody like last year to start the season, then what was the point? What's the benefit of having a great linebacker if he can't be part of a great defense? So that's the bigger picture here. Can the Seahawks defense be, let's say, top 10 in scoring? If they are, then Wagner's third contract, the big bet that the Seahawks made on him, will be validated. So That's my thoughts on Bobby. We need him to have a good season, but we also, maybe even bigger than that, need this defense that he leads, that he is the highest paid player on, and that he is presumably the best player on, needs to play at a high level. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Peace out. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And look, don't misunderstand me. I am not saying that everything that happens on this defense is the responsibility of Bobby Wagner. What I am saying is that if this team was going to invest that much money, that much capital into a player like Bobby Wagner, then there needed to be a plan to make sure they could give him a good defense, that they could build a good defense around him. And for the last 2 seasons, this defense has not really been good. Last year, we showed sparks at the end. We showed signs of life at the end. I need those signs of life to be life in 2021. All right. See y'all later. Go Hawks. Another video later today, maybe. See y'all in stream.